And we're looking at different attributes of God. But the thing that Rebecca and I were talking about this week is, like, you can't even really call them attributes because attributes we define, in certain ways. So then it's like it almost puts them in like this box, like, oh, this is the attribute. So I was reading a book called Knowledge of the Holy by Tozer, which, if you want to read something, that's something to read. But he puts it in here a couple ways that helped me to understand what it means when we're talking about the attributes of God. So I'm going to read what he said. These are not my words, as you will soon find out as I read them. It would seem to be necessary before proceeding further to define the word attribute as used in this volume. It is not used in its philosophical sense, nor confined to its strictest theological meaning. By it is meant simply whatever may be correctly ascribed to God. Basically, an attribute of God is whatever God has in any way revealed as being true of himself. So we're just trying to learn some things about what God says about himself so that we can deepen our relationship with him and so that we can gain a deeper understanding of who he is. After that, Tozer says, an attribute then is a part of God. It is how God is, and as far as the reasoning mind can go, we may say that it is what God is, though as I've tried to explain exactly what he is, he cannot tell us. Of what God is conscious when he is conscious of self, only he knows. The things of God knoweth no man but the Spirit of God. Only to an equal could God communicate the mystery of his Godhead, and to think of God as having an equal is to fall into an intellectual absurdity. The divine attributes, what we know to be true of God, he does not possess them as qualities. They are how God is as he reveals himself to his creatures. Love, for instance, is not something God has and which may grow or diminish or cease to be. His love is the way God is. And when he loves, he is simply being himself. And so with the other attributes. So basically what he's saying is these aren't things that you pin on him. This is who he is. And even in saying that it's who he is, we still can't completely fathom that. Because the only person that could fathom it is God. So that's why when we talk about the attributes of God, we're just talking about what he says about himself and how much we can try to then comprehend what he says about himself to possibly know him in a deeper manner. Does that make sense? Okay, so as we go through this series, we're also getting various perspectives on this matter. So an attribute we're looking at tonight is God is eternal. And you can open to Psalm 90. That's where we're going to be. But before we get into that, when we're talking about eternity, we have to talk about time a little bit, okay? Now, I get all nerded out when we talk about God and time and all that, so I'm going to try to keep this a little not as nerdy as normal because I like talking about the fact that we can't really understand it. Anyways, God is eternal. Eternal means without beginning or end, lasting forever, always existing. But even the definition doesn't really do it because all of those definitions still have to do with time and some kind of a time constraint that we put on it. I read a quote that said, God dwells as eternity, but time dwells in God. Okay? And then C.S. Lewis, this is how he explains it, so you guys can get a picture. This is how he explains time and eternity, okay? So think of a sheet of paper. Okay, everybody got it in their mind? Now, expand that sheet of paper to be infinite. There'd be no end to this sheet of paper, okay? Then, at that point, that's eternity, or God, which is eternal, okay? Then on that paper, draw a short line of about 6 inches. That's time. And as the line begins and ends on this infinite piece of paper, so time began in God and will end in God. Does that help you get it at all? Everybody's like, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, here's the deal. I totally get that God was there when time began, that he created time, right? It's in the Bible. In Genesis 1:1, it says, in the beginning, God. So in the beginning, at the start, God. He was already there. He's the one that made time. So he started the whole thing, which I can kind of Like, okay, I can comprehend that. The hard part is trying to imagine that God is at the beginning and at the end at the same time, so to speak, because he's eternal. He sees time the same way we would see a 6-inch line on an infinite piece of paper. He sees the whole thing at once. And not just the beginning and the end, but every individual part in between, all at the same time. So, now we'll go back to Psalm 90. So everybody can go stop being a weirdo and let's look at the Bible. All right. Psalm 90. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, you brought forth the whole world. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. 1,000 years in your sight is like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. Yet you sweep people away in the sleep of death. They are like the new grass of the morning. In the morning it springs up new, and by evening it is dry and withered. We are consumed by your anger and terrified by your indignation. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. All our days pass away under your wrath. We finish our years with a moan. Our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures, yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. If only we knew the power of your anger. Your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Relent, Lord, how long will it be? Have compassion on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, for as many years as we have seen trouble. May your deeds be shown to your servants, your splendor to their children. May the favor of the Lord our God rest on us. Establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Okay, this psalm, Psalm 90, it's the only psalm that was written by Moses. So if you guys didn't know that, which also makes it the oldest psalm out of all the psalms, because Moses, he was old. All right. There's 3 parts we're going to look at when we look at this psalm, okay, as we relate to the eternal God. As we go through this, keep in mind all the words, and I'll kind of go through them again, that are used in this psalm to describe different time frames, okay? So the first word you can write down is praise. Verses 1 and 2 talks about praising God. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world from everlasting to everlasting, you are God, okay? Moses opens up the psalm basically giving praise to God, which is smart. The time references he has in there says has been, throughout, before, brought forth, from everlasting to everlasting. And this really is the main point of the psalm and really the main point of our lives. We are called to be those who give praise to God. And again, this is this is going to be repetitive to some degree, but it's not just about singing songs. It's about our lives being lives of praise. In everything we do, coming from a place of understanding that we have an opportunity to give praise to God, whether we're at home or at work or at school or at church or at the store or wherever. The things that we engage in either give praise to God or they don't give praise to God. And it's really up to us. And I think sometimes we look at that and we're like, oh, I always got to be, giving praise to God. Like it's a bummer, or you have better things to do. But what we have to understand is giving praise to God is what we are made to do and what we will be doing the whole time when we're in heaven. So when we can see him for who he really is, we'll give praise to God. When we can see him as our dwelling place and our creator, when we can see him as eternal, when we can see him as God, then there's the only right thing that comes out of that is to give praise. So we fix our eyes on those facts that Moses lays out in there. He's our dwelling place. He's from everlasting to everlasting. He's God. It'll be much easier for us to be at the place where we continually are praising God, okay? Second part, you can write down the word perceive. Verses 3 through 12 is kind of talks about our perception of things, okay? About seeing things as they really are. Basically taking a look at ourselves in light of looking at God, okay? We are a blip, really. Our lives are, if you just take from the beginning of known history to today, and then you put how long you've been alive on there, it's like so nothing, right? We're like less than a spot on that line that I was talking about. And the amount of references to time in this next section, there's a ton in there. And now we got to understand, Moses is coming at this part from a pretty specific place in his life, okay? It's nearing the end of the 40 years of them wandering around in the desert, and he's calling out to God. But it's pertinent to us because it gives us a picture of how to be those who really take a look at our own lives and really try to perceive it. And, it goes through, and he's talking, some of the stuff is, pretty hardcore. He's talking about people turning back to dust. And then in verse 4, he kind of breaks it down like 1,000 years in your sight is like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night, which gives us a little bit even better idea of a watch in the night is like a 3-hour window, I think 3 or 4 hour window. And so like 1,000 years, that's what it's like to God, just like nothing. And it talks about that. And he goes on and on and on, but the verse I want to focus on is verse 12. It says, "Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom." So basically Moses, he goes through all this stuff about how essentially fleeting our life is, and how, we're just kind of like here for a minute and then gone. And then he goes into this and he says, basically, show us how to make every day count for you, Lord. You're eternal. We're not eternal. Show us how to make each day on this earth count for you. Teach us to number our days. Teach us to take inventory of this time that you have given us. See, every day when we get up, we have exactly 1 day, right? You guys know that. When you wake up tomorrow, you have 1 day. And we don't think like that, though. We think ahead, and we think of what I got going, later this week, and later this month, and later this year, and next year, and we're planning ahead for things. And really, though, we got 1 day. A couple weeks ago, I got to coach soccer, and we were in a tournament, and we lost the first game. And so we're talking to the team, and the team's like, well, if we win the second game, then we might play this guys or this guys, and then if we win this one, we would go here, and then if we win this one, we go here. I was like, hey, guys, check it out. You only have 1 game to worry about. Just whatever's the next one. That's the only thing you even have to think about. You don't have to think about all the other games because you haven't made it past the one that's in front of you. And I think for us, we need to maybe start thinking that way. We have an eternal God that has control over every single aspect of our entire time frame. So rather than us trying to figure out all this stuff down the road, we need to just think like, hey, we have today. The Bible tells us we're not promised tomorrow. It also tells us don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself, right? So we have today. So what if we started living our lives like today was the day? This was the only day that we have to think about. Now, am I telling you okay, I've read stories about dudes that, these preachers that had big followings, and then they predicted, when Jesus was coming back, so all the people that followed him sold all their stuff or gave it away because it was like, well, Jesus is coming back. I don't need any of this stuff. And then, I don't know if you guys know, spoiler alert, Jesus didn't come back. And then these people were out all their stuff. There was one guy that was reading a thing. He predicted 12 times. I'm like, why are people still listening to him? Or were they still listening to him? Anyways, I'm not talking about today write a bucket list and it's I got to do everything on that list, that kind of thing. This is not about, going crazy about, today being the last day. It's about taking an inventory of our hearts, right? The point of Moses' request to learn the number of our days is to gain a heart of wisdom and to do what it is that God has called us to do today. Because even though God's huge and he's eternal and he lives outside of our time frame but knows all about it, he cares about you and me, and he cares about us today. So for us, I think it's just a reminder. Moses is in here saying, don't wait until tomorrow. And kind of another thing, too, I think sometimes, it's evening time, right? It's after 7, and might have not had a great day. We might have, I don't know, might have blown it, might have not been awesome, whatever. Just because you leave here today, it's almost over, doesn't mean you have to wait until tomorrow to start this, okay? You know what I'm saying? This whole live for today and live in what God wants you to do and what he has for you to do today can start actually today. Even though there's not a ton of today left, you can still start it today. Okay, don't wait till tomorrow. You guys do that? Like you mess something up and then you're like, well, tomorrow will be a better day. It's like, yeah, you got the rest of the day. You don't have to throw in a whole day just because you had like bad 5 minutes, right? I do that sometimes. I have like a bad time, and then it's like the whole day is, in the pits, and it takes a while to get out. We shouldn't do that anymore. So I'm saying don't do that. I'm telling you not to. Today, number your day. See this day for what it is, because this day is a gift from God. Okay? It's like a blank check, right? And he gives it to us, and you only get to spend it once. So what are we spending it on? The third thing you can write down is the word plea. Okay? In verses 13 through 17, Moses is now asking God for some stuff. He's pleading with him. And I think it would be good for us to ask for some of the same stuff, okay? Now there's a bunch more time references in here. And the reason why those time references are important, again, because God's eternal and Moses is not, just like us. And all of these time references just point back to we live inside this thing that he created. So the things he asks for, he says, relent. He asks, how long? He says, have compassion. He says, satisfy us, make us glad, show us your deeds. May your favor rest on us. Establish the work of our hands. Establish the work of our hands again. It's not known with absolute certainty what exactly is going on at this time in Moses' leadership and in the people that he's leading. But I don't think it really matters, because everything that he's pleading for in here, it's like, I'm great asking for the same stuff that Moses is asking for here. And going through it, we can kind of look and break it down. He's like, give us compassion, right? He says, relent, Lord, how long will it be? Have compassion on your servants. Anybody need less compassion in their life or more? Because I could always use some more compassion, right? The thing is, Moses asks for this right after he's obviously going through something that doesn't seem great. When we're going through a hard time, and I'm not sure, again, what exactly Moses was going through. My guess is this, 40 years of wandering around in the desert listening to these guys complain for a lot of it. He was probably like, Lord, how much longer do we have to do this? But instead of whining or complaining or getting mad or hurt or whatever else, what if we just turned to the Lord and said, I need some compassion. I need your compassion, Lord. Then Moses asked for God to satisfy him in the morning with his unfailing love. And he asks him that, and then he says, this is why. So I can sing for joy and be glad in all my days. Basically, when I wake up, let me be reminded right off the bat of how much you love me. That way the rest of the day is going to be nothing but joy, because I'm going to be satisfied with God's love. Not running around looking for something in this world to satisfy me, but just God's unfailing love. And he goes on. Talks about however long I was afflicted, let that much be gladness. Or however many years I've been in trouble, let that many years be good times. And it continues. And here's the bottom line. When I look at this, and I look at this psalm, and I look at it in reference to God being an eternal God, I see Moses looking at God as eternal God and saying, this is my response, because I can't really comprehend what it means. I can't really understand what God being eternal really means to us. I can't fathom it. I know it means endless. I know it means always. I know it means, from everlasting to everlasting. I know it means way bigger than I can ever comprehend. And I look at this psalm and I see all these time references from Moses to God, and it's like that's the only way that I can truly understand how I fit in this picture with God being eternal. He is endless. He is infinite. He completely covers all of our time. And so even going through that, as we look at today, as we look at tomorrow, as we look at this week or next week or 2020, we look at these things, we see them with a God that has everything under control because he sees all of that at exactly the same time. So even when Moses is going through this, he's talking about all of those things in relation to the eternal God. So as we take this psalm in light of God being eternal, and I think it gives us a little bit of a picture of how we're called to live this life that he has given us on this earth in light of him being eternal. Basically, we've been placed inside these parameters, but it's kind of up to us if we'll try to make something of them on our own or if we're going to submit them to the one that has them all under control in the first place. Moses realizes that God's in control of this little thing that we call time, so that in every aspect of it, we're recognizing and submitting to what he wants us to do in that. All the while knowing that this amount that we're on this earth is really just a small thing, because when this ends, then eternity doesn't start, but then we are in eternity with him. If we lay our time here before the one who owns time, I think he'll direct our steps and use us to do what he's called us to do. And I know this is big, and it's kind of, it's a little bit confusing to me to try to even talk about the eternal God, because I can't even comprehend what that exactly means, okay? But the last thing, one more Tozer quote, since we spent some time with him. We who live in this nervous age would be wise to meditate on our lives and our days long and often before the face of God and on other edge of eternity. For we are made for eternity as certainly as we are made for time. But as responsible mortal beings, we must deal with both. Psalm 90, I believe, was Moses reminding us of the exact same thing, that we are made for eternity, but we're also made in time. All right? Let's pray. God, thank you for this attribute that it's big, and if I spend too much time thinking about it, I feel like my head's going to explode. Because you, God, are so much bigger than anything that we can even understand or comprehend. And even the word eternal doesn't really do you justice, because it's just a word that we've made up for a time frame that we can't even understand. So God, I pray that tonight we would look at this fact that you're eternal, and in light of our lives here on this earth, the temporal part of our lives, the lives that we have right now, God, it would change our perspective. It would cause us to trust you more. It would cause us to listen to you more. It would cause us to desire deeper relationship with you more and more, because we know that you have all of this under control. We know that even in walking through this life that we live, you know every single thing about it from beginning to end already. So God, I pray that as we see you as the eternal God, it would cause our faith and our trust to grow, knowing that you have it all under control. God, I thank you for this night. I thank you for each person here. I pray that you would bless them. In Jesus' name, amen.